Hey, it's Zack, and I'm back with another episode of Elevate and Accelerate. And I'm really excited to be introducing you today to a really good friend of mine and somebody who I've had the opportunity to talk with a couple of times here. I've read her book, Life Hacks for Hard Times, which is actually amazing. There's such great information there, and she's going to share a lot of that with us today, as well as her story and what brought her to a place where she has inspired, helped, and really challenged people to gain wisdom from their own journey, as she has so well today. So, Christie, thank you so much for joining me. Really excited to dive into your story and your wisdom.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah. So like I said, your book, Life Hacks for Hard Times, is 27 proven and practical tips for people and how they can overcome adversity and kind of move through their life's journey in an empowering way. And so what you did is you had broke that up into, 3 different sections of see, believe, and do. And so can you kind of tell me a little bit about like what those 3 categories are and how you landed on them?
Sure. Yeah, actually that was my husband's brilliant idea, but 2 years ago when I wrote this book, I started reflecting back on all of the different life challenges that I'd faced over the last 2-3 decades. And I started to realize that the tools that I used to get out and through those challenges and become a better person because of them were all the same tools. They just, I used them in different ways at different times. And so, when I mind mapped out what all these tools look like, then Matt and I, my husband, looked at it and we were like, he's like, this really is 3 sections, and so the C section is, things like you have to first identify the truth of the situation. You can't argue with reality. We have to understand where we're at in the situation. We have to gain self-awareness, perspective, look at our options, things like that. And so what I find with people is sometimes why people are stuck in their hard is because they may be working well in one of these 3 sections or 2 of these 3 sections, but they're missing a piece of the puzzle. And when I did this live, and then I've had people, you've ever put a puzzle together and you're missing a piece? That's like the most frustrating thing.
So frustrating.
Yes, we all live like that so many times. And so and then when you move from the C section, when you finally have the right perspective, you kind of see things for what they really are, then you can transition into the belief section, which is really focused on our mindset and what we're telling ourselves, what we're believing, finding opportunity in the challenge, growing through things like tools like that we'll get more into on this podcast. And then you focus into the largest section in my book, because I'm an action oriented person, but that's the do section, because you can see things clearly and you can believe all day long, but if you don't actually do something with that, you're still going to stay stuck. And so the tools in that do section were just real practical, simple, tangible things that I've used, for the last 20 plus years in my own life and have helped my clients overcome their challenges. So that's kind of how we broke that book up into the sections to kind of make it make sense and help people identify, whether it's through reading my book or in a workshop, like maybe which section they're really stuck in.
I love that. And it makes it really easy for people to understand. And we'll kind of dive into each of those categories and maybe a couple of chapters in there that I think would be really helpful for our listeners to be equipped with tools to kind of face their own challenges and things that they might be going through. But I think one of the most important things, and something that we talk about very often on this podcast, is really story, and how story and our perspective on story influences a lot of these things. And I know, having talked to you, that, there was a pivotal moment in your life that kind of set you on this journey of now, sharing your wisdom from stage to large audiences and coaching programs and all the things that you really offer to help people now because of your journey. But that's where you are now. But it all kind of started, you're lying on the floor, ready to take your life, kind of, facing those challenges and not knowing, what the answers were. And you had a vision, right? And this vision was to help people. So kind of describe to me, what that moment was like. And then let's kind of talk through some of the things that kind of led you to that point in your life in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. So that moment was probably about 4 years into a 7-year mental health battle and physical health battle that I was facing. And I was pretty much in a debilitated state. Literally every day was survival and just fighting to just barely function. And at some point when you get that worn out, you start to lose your fight and you start to not know what else to do when you're in that state. And I remember the day clearly, or night clear. I don't remember if it was night or day, but I was laying on my hardwood floor in my bedroom and just in the middle of a full-fledged panic and anxiety attack, which I was used to living with those several times a day. And
Mm,
I just remember like being in one of those moments where I was like, I can't do this one more day. Like literally I would continue to beg God to not let me wake up the next day, because I'm like, I can't keep fighting this torment. And I've went through a lot prior to all that, which I'll get into, but this was just like the hardest and longest battle of my life. And I remember like thinking, I just need to end it all, and doing this. And in the middle of like shaking and panicking and hardly hyperventilating. And I remember seeing myself on a stage talking to people. And I remember like somewhere deep inside me, below all of the panic and the irrational fear and everything that was going through me, um, telling myself, Christy, you have got to continue to fight to the other side of this, because there's other people that are in the same situation that you're in, and they don't know how to get out of it either. But if you can fight and overcome and get to the other side of it, and you're willing to share your story, which I have always been, because it's why I do what I do, but then I can get to the other side and help other people. And that vision
mm.
that day has kept me going. It kept me going for the next 3 years to actually turn the corner in that battle. And then it's kept me going as I've rebuilt my life and my business and my mindsets and everything else for the last 9 years. Even on my hard days, like, and, I remember that vision of like, no, this is why I went through what I went through to be able to do what I'm doing now. So,
Yeah, and we'll kind of get to how people can do that and some strategies
mhm.
on and some practical tips on how they might be able to start turning that quarter, and how that all kind of gains with or starts with gaining perspective. But we don't start in those places. And look, I'm a
Yes.
veteran, and the suicide rate among veterans is astronomical, right? And the numbers people are typically fight on, but it's anywhere from 20 to 40 a day of veterans who are taking their own lives and struggling with stuff like this. But PTS or PTSD and trauma and all these kinds of things are rampant in people, and they don't know how to deal with it or what to
Yes.
do with it. But it's a process, right? Like it's like you're not born wanting to take your own life and
Right.
sort of being depressed. And so kind of walk us through your journey. Like what was early life like for you? What was where did you grow up? What were kind of some of the things you enjoyed and challenges you faced then?
Yeah, early life was good for me from an outside perspective. And, and if I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had great parents. They're still alive today. I've got a lot of things from them. My work ethic, my integrity, my compassion and, generosity towards others, and all things were things I've learned in childhood. But I learned along the way that your parents and you as a person, you can't give what you don't have. And because of their upbringings and their things, there was a certain level of maybe relational and emotional intelligence that they just didn't have, and they weren't able to give me those things. But yet here, Christy comes into the world, and I'm a very motivated, driven, high energy, emotional person that's like, ready to change the world at, 12 years old. And I don't know what to do with all of that, and I
Mm,
remember, and growing up in a religious atmosphere, which my faith is a huge part of my life, but I've had to undo a lot of the wrong thinking with that along the way as well.
yeah.
And so, it was kind of the perfect storm internally for me in my teenage years, where I started battling with some OCD and things, but I didn't even know to call it OCD then. I just kind of chalked it up as, this is my little bit of crazy, but it's not stopping me from living my life. And I don't know who to even talk to about this. So I just kind of put it in the
Mm,
back of my head, and I kept on going. And I went on mission trips, and I ran summer feeding programs for inner city children. And I just did everything. And then I got married at a young age at 18, about to turn 19, and relocated my life to St. Louis. And through those years, early years of my marriage, again, here I am like ready to change the world. And I married a man who like barely got himself to work every day. And that was about all he was interested in. And,
wow.
but I didn't know what I knew, about self-awareness and personal development and marriage and all of that stuff, 30 years later and so it caused a lot of tension in our marriage and friction. And I wanted, I never wanted to live status quo. I wanted to change the world. I had big plans, lots of
Mm,
dreams. And so things got rocky, and I continued to fight. At that point, started fighting for the marriage and just trying to make it what I thought it should be. And but it takes two. And so it didn't work. And along through that process, there were some other things. We ended up in a bad house deal that cost us a lot of money and a couple of years of our life, and in a lawsuit. And it was just a whole bunch of that I wasn't expecting in my early 20s. I thought, I'm young, I'm married, I'm going to go change the world. And then life started throwing me some curveballs, and I started making some wrong decisions, and I started paying for the consequences of those decisions. And then I got into So basically, I gave my husband an ultimatum and said, either we work this, you like, we make this marriage, but it should be, or I'm out. And, he decided he wanted to be out. And so, a few months later, we ended up divorced. But in the process of that, I made a worse decision in having an affair with one of my best friends. And that relationship was full of lies and manipulation and everything that an affair comes with. And that year of my life really rocked my world. And at an internal level. And then so I'm still carrying all this baggage from my childhood into this, and then that ended. And, the night that ended, I was still Christy, the emotional, driven, same person I am today. I'm just more refined today, but I didn't know what to do with all these emotions and things. And so then I relocated back to Pittsburgh and met my current husband. Well, at that point, you know, Matt didn't know what he was getting into. He was 27. He had one girlfriend his entire life. So we were like opposite sides of these. He's an engineer. He's calm, laid back, steady Eddie. Like, I don't think he's cried like 2 days in his life, And so, and then he meets me, and then all of a sudden we decide to get married. And I'm at the beginning of this nervous breakdown that I don't realize is coming. Like you said, you don't see it coming. And so I get remarried, I relocate, I start my own business, I'm working a full-time job, I start to try to fight infertility. And so I go through all this, I finally fix my infertility issues, I finally have our first child. All my kids were born at home by my choice. And so I'm going through all this, but in the process of having all these kids, I felt like I woke up one day like this driven person running a business, raising a family, going to homeschool my kids, wanting a great marriage, all this stuff, wanted to build orphanages. I had a goal list it was a binder. And then one day I was sitting in a corner debilitated with panic and anxiety and OCD, but it had accumulated up over the years. And so,
So
then that,
just a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so you're obviously running us through a long journey and a long process of different stuff. And I know because of our limited time we're getting in here, but it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like this idea of all of these different things are happening, but because you didn't have context for it or an understanding from like OCD to the emotions that were going on inside of you and all this stuff, it was like, if I don't know what to do with it, the only thing I can do is just is either bury it or like take that energy and put it into something else, which is, I would imagine, where a lot of that drive and focus and energy for that drive was coming from. But it was built on, on sand, essentially, right? It was kind of a house being built on, this turbulence that eventually was going to break down and crack. And that's kind of what you got to, right? Was in this, it was kind of building inside all the way up until that moment.
For sure. Yeah. And it led me to that 7-year, breakdown where it was like, it felt like it happened overnight. But as I looked back and has rebuilt my life, I could see, how it didn't really happen overnight. It led me to that, and in that fight, it was like, I never wanted to just put a Band-Aid on it. I was like, my body, my mind, my emotions are trying to tell me something here. What are they trying to tell me? Unfortunately, it took me 7 years to figure that out, and get results, and ended up with my husband quitting his job to come home to take care of me, and, on and on and on the list goes. And so that led us to sell everything and take life we bought an old paid for RV, and we took our kids and we started traveling, for a few months, which turned into a few years. And so it's been one challenge after the other, but like through it all, I feel like I have become, we were talking with a friend the other night at dinner, and he was going through some serious challenges himself. And he's like, this is like a college degree that I would have never signed up for. Like, I would have never said, yes, sign me up, I want to do this. But he's like, I don't think I would undo it because it has made me the person I am at this moment.
And I think that's a great segue kind of into the next part of this. But I want to sort of summarize for our listeners and kind of knowing some of your context too, sort of what this is. And that's like, you personally have gone through so many different challenges, from starting businesses to losing businesses to, having a home, losing a home, to, infertility and multiple marriages and infidelity. And, it's like all of this stuff that you have gone through, whether you understood it in the moment, has been like you said, a tool to give you, the life that you have now and
Mm-hmm.
the ability to be able to help other people who may be going through any one of those challenges, right? Like, and because you have experience, you've got wisdom.
Yes.
And I think one of the most important things, and one of your chapters in your book, as we talk about here in the section of seeing, is really gaining perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it would be really easy for you, I imagine, and I know it has been for myself in a lot of ways, to like to look at the challenges of our past with a different lens.
Yes.
And so kind of talk to me a little bit about how, shifting perspective, or the type of perspective that you had on a situation, hindered you, but then also has now empowered you.
Yeah, there's a quote I love. It's, your perspective can either become your prison or your passport. And I think it's so true. And we have the choice to make in that. And, you know, early in my life, I kept feeling like I'm losing time. I'm losing speed because, I was, supposed to be here at 22 and here at 26 and here at 30. And, by 30, I wanted to have 5 kids. I was having my first and then my second marriage. And, and so our perspective early on was like, all of the time I'm losing and the speed I'm losing and the momentum. And because I had big things and I felt like this is never going to happen because like things are not going the way I had planned. Christy had a plan and it is not going the way it's planned. And so, but I had to, it's somewhere along the way, I had to shift that perspective and just realize that I had to embrace this and I had to start growing through it. And I think that shift of, because I'm still going, we all are, but I still have stuff I'm dealing with, and fighting.
Mm.
And I have literally just accepted the fact that adversity is part of life. And if I'm going to wait, because, my view early on is like, I'll be happy when, how many people say that? I'll be happy
Yeah.
when. And I had to realize like, I am never going to say that again. I'm going to be happy right now in the midst of turmoil, chaos, whatever, and look at the things that I have went through with the perspective lens of I am the person I am today. I have the empathy I have for other people, the compassion, because I was a very critical at 19. I was the person that's like, get your crap together. What is your problem? Like, what's the matter with you people? And then
Yeah.
life starts slapping you in the face and you're like, maybe I shouldn't say that anymore. Do you know what I mean? And so now I can empathize with people that want like me that want change, that want to get through, but they just don't even know what to do to get to the other side. And it's
Mm.
like, I do know that. And I know what it feels like to hurt so bad and struggle so hard that you're just like, I don't even think I can do this one more day and everything in between.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you know
Mm-hmm.
that you don't know it, right?
Correct.
And so it's gaining perspective, is in and of itself a process. It's not just
Yes.
like oh, now I know.
Mm-hmm.
You almost don't really gain perspective until you've gone through things and can come out on the other side of those challenges, which
Yes.
give you a broader view of stuff. But then using that tool, to go back and look at everything,
Mm-hmm.
and new situations, and having that perspective, is a great way, as you say in your book too, to stay grounded,
Yes.
right? And but once you have that self-awareness, once you've started to gain perspective on your circumstances, it kind of brings you into the next thing that you had just touched on a little bit, is that we're all growing through things, which is a
Mm-hmm.
unique perspective
Yes.
on what we're going through. And you have a couple of different chapters that talk about this, the growth mindset, and things aren't necessarily happening to you, they're happening
Mm-hmm.
for you, right? And so let's kind of talk to our audience a little bit about like this idea of growing through things. How can you, if you're in the midst of something right now, gain
Mm-hmm.
that perspective so that you can grow through it? What would be some practical advice for that?
Yeah, I think it's um, part of it is being willing to look at it from, not play the victim, which we all have did probably at parts in our life and continue, but to look and go, okay, this adversity is a gift for me right now. Like it's trying to teach me something. It's trying to grow me into the person I can become. It's trying to do something for me. But I think as a society and as a people, we don't like discomfort. We don't like pain. We don't like, naturally. And so we,
Hmm.
we tend to want to, think that, oh, this is hard, so I need to, exit. And not all hard needs to be, we need to embrace that pain, as I call it, and start to grow through it. And I think, the best, probably one of the best examples I have of this in my personal life is my marriage with Matt. We've been married almost 19 years, and it was hell on earth for the first 5 years. I was a broken mess, and he was like, I
Mm.
thought we were just going to get married and watch movies and have fun, and so we were like to and there were many times that we talked about leaving, but instead we decided, like, can we grow through this? Can we somehow grow through the pain that we're growing through and causing each other? Can we somehow leverage our strengths together and really, and now we have, like, a, a, a great relationship. It's not perfect. It still needs improvement, but like, we work together well. Like, people admire us all the time. And I don't say that from an arrogant standpoint, but people are like, oh, you guys are so lucky. And it's like, no, this has nothing to do with luck. We chose to
Mm.
grow through this together and change, together to make what we have today. And so I think, whatever situation the listener is in or you're going through right now, I think if you can look at it, and instead of like, oh, this keeps happening to me, or this is so hard, and go like, what can I, because the sooner you can do that, the sooner you can get out of it too. Honestly,
Mm.
the sooner that you can embrace the grief and let you process the emotions and walk through it, the sooner that you can let go of the bitterness, the sooner that you can do those things, you can get to the other side. And does that answer your question, or I'm just.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And it's, I can look at my own life and see in so many different ways in which I played the victim
Mhm.
and have, continued to do that. Right. Because there's something in us that believes like this is happening to me, and it's the world's against me. The circumstances are against
Mhm.
me. The cards are stacked against me. It's just the
Yes.
hand I dealt. Right. Like we've
Mhm.
got idioms and phrases that describe this victim mentality.
Yes.
That's just a part of our culture in so many ways,
Mhm.
at least here, in the US and where I've been. And so it's like that perspective that
Mhm.
you have of even just shifting from I'm not the victim and this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. So how can I grow through this and come out the other side as a better person is just so powerful. And I think the next question then is, well, why would I want to do that, or how would I do that? And uh, I think what you talk about as far as being able to know your purpose,
Mhm.
right? It's like when you can identify the reason why you're on this earth, even if it's just to love your family well,
Mhm.
or if it's to, just be a good husband, daughter, brother, whatever it is, like what is your purpose, and identifying that purpose is what can help you to drive your life forward. Right.
Yes.
And so, kind of talk to us a little bit. I mean, obviously you had that vision, which gave you your purpose, but talk to us a little bit about being able to know your purpose and how maybe somebody could work to identify what that might be.
Yeah, we all hear the, know your why. And, you walk through stuff like this in workshops, and it's like, and people come up with these generic phrases. But what I have experienced with knowing your purpose and helping people to do that is your purpose has to be something so compelling and so, that's just naturally pulling you forward, so that, I heard it described once, I don't know, but, when you're standing in horse manure, like if you're just looking down at the horse manure you're standing in, it's hard to see anything else, but if you could still be standing in that same horse manure, but if you can look out over the horizon and you know where you're headed and you know why you're headed there, then it doesn't matter what you're standing in right now, because that is pulling you forward out of that. But it can't be and the other myth that you touched, I mean, is your purpose doesn't have to be world changing. Like, we all can't, we aren't meant to be Oprah or some big name of somebody doing, like, your purpose could be like being an amazing wife and mother. It could be, being it could be being a CPA. It could be anything. But the key is knowing, the question that this isn't my question, but it's one that helps people identify their purpose, is how are people's lives better when they cross my path? Like, what is that thing that you're
Mm.
doing for other people? And so when I'm living true to Christie's values and purpose, which are, freedom, adding value to people, and growth, like, that can look many different ways. That can be on a stage talking to a bunch of people and inspiring them, but that can also be me taking coffee to the car wash guys on a day when it's hot out, and taking them iced coffee and saying, here, like, so I can live my purpose in all different ways. But when you know your purpose, it gives you that reason to get up in the morning. It gives you that. And I think when you start feeling like you're going through just the motions and there's no end in sight, and what's the point of it? We're looking, as human beings, we're craving that purpose, that fulfillment. And when you
Yeah.
start just feeling like you're on that hamster wheel every day, life sucks like that, and it does.
Yeah.
And, I think you've got to take the time to identify that.
Yeah. And Just as kind of a summary of what we've been walking through, it's like, in the C section of your book, we're talking about gaining perspective either on yourself or your
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. And then, right now kind of talking about this believe part of that process where, you really at your core need to believe that, one, like, you're valuable enough to have a purpose and be
Yes.
deserving of a purpose, and that you have something to contribute to your community or the world or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be. And you're not going to know until first you believe in yourself to be able to do
For
that,
sure.
and then you try it, right? And so I love how you have that, and it brings us into the last section of your book, which is the doing part. And one of the things that stood out to me in what you were talking about, which I think is a good segue into this section, is, being able to find joy in the journey. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think our world, at least in my experience, in many different ways, is concerned with happiness,
Yes.
which obviously you talk about. And it's this idea that, like, well, what do I need to do to be happy? If I just had this, if I
Mm-hmm.
just was able to do that, if I just had a better job, then I would be happy and things would be
Mm-hmm.
okay. And what we've learned is, the richest people aren't necessarily happy, right?
Yes.
They have all the things, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
happy. So, kind of talk with us a little bit, from your perspective of this idea of finding joy in the journey, and how we might go about doing that.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, just what you were saying, like happiness isn't bad, and happy is a strong, good emotion that we feel from time to time. But when you chase that, it doesn't end well. And so, but joy for me is something deeper. It runs below the circumstances, it runs below, everything going on around you. And I think the formula for me, because for a while I kind of fought this idea of, well, I don't want to be happy where I'm at because I don't want to be where I'm at. And if I decide to be content and happy here, then I'm not going to get here. And I
Hmm.
realized it's not one or the other. Every single day, Matt and I laugh so much. Like, and my kids are like, Mom, like, when I'm gone, they miss me. Like, they're like, Mom, it was so boring here without you. And and we just laugh all the time about everything under the sun. And it's not because our life is great and perfect and all of that, but I have learned that I can find joy right where I'm at. I can grow right where I'm planted and be content while looking towards that purpose and vision, and actually moving and taking action towards something better. So it's
Hmm.
not, I'm going to be, and I learned this actually from a missionary that I did work for at a nonprofit years ago when I lived in St. Louis. And they would move every couple months overseas. And she said, I learned to never live temporarily. If we're going to be in an apartment for 3 months, I'm putting up pictures and I'm making it home, and we're going to spend these 3 months the best we can. And that
Hmm.
never left me. And I've learned that, and I have today, and that's all I'm promised right this moment. Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
if but you don't have to sacrifice. Like, you don't, just because you're finding joy where you're at doesn't mean you can't get to a better place. And I think that's been the formula. I mean, there's more tips on this in my book, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that's been the one key factor for me that I have, been in my life, and I live it. We find joy every time in the craziest circumstances. We laugh probably about things, and most people be like, why are you laughing about that? But because it's just like laugh or cry, and I've did my share of crying. So,
Well, I love that idea of not living temporarily. That's
mm-hmm,
a good tagline right there. But,
mm-hmm.
I think too, like you're talking about, is a lot of times we have the tendency to equate, contentment with settling for our current
Yes,
circumstances, right? And
yes,
that's what you're saying, is like, you
correct.
can be content without settling.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great perspective to have.
Yes.
So there's two things that I think I want to finalize our conversation with here, and then I'll have a couple of closing questions for you. But, there's really two things here that I think are extremely important for people as they're going through this
Mm-hmm.
journey, of we call life, right? And
Yes.
and that's having a good support system, and self care. Right. And those are
Yes.
two things that you do cover in your book, and some things that you talk about, from stage and in your workshops and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that as well. But what's, having a good support system is easy if you were born into a good support system, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
right? But for people that don't have a healthy, family structure, or maybe, an aware friends group or something like that, maybe finding a support structure is a little bit more difficult. So, kind of talk with us a little bit about that support system and how it worked in your life, and maybe some places where people can look and, to try to be able to build that for themselves too.
Yeah, a support system has been key in my life, and it hasn't come from a lot of people. It's come from very few, actually, but it's
Hmm.
been having the right support. And I'm a very independent, self-sufficient person. I have learned to depend on other people, but I still struggle with that. I'm a person that's just like, I'd rather be on my shoulders, get the jobs. You want the job done, do it. I don't need anybody,
Yeah.
just let me do it. But then life starts hitting you in the face, like we talked about, and I realized maybe Christy doesn't really have all this together herself. And so I think, for me, Matt has been a key support in when I married Matt, I had been through a marriage with a lackadaisical husband and somebody that didn't really, and, at first glance, Matt was a similar personality type, and I had a list of what I wanted, and he knew that list, and he's like, I don't measure up on this list. I'm like, I know you don't. But, but I didn't, God knew what the next 20 years held, and he knew, like, Christy needs a Matt in her life or she's not going to survive to the other side, and
Hmm.
and so he has been, and my parents have been a key support, and a couple pastor friends of ours. And there's been, because when I went through, my mental health battle, a lot of people didn't understand it. It wasn't talked about even like it is today. And when I tried to talk to a couple close friends about it, they didn't get it. And I immediately realized I can't go there with people. I have to figure this out myself. And so through
Hmm.
that battle, I had my mom and I had Matt, and, that was about it. But it was enough to get me to the other side. And so whatever you're facing, and the other thing I do want to say about support system is you've got to have somebody, don't go try to talk to somebody about marriage that's been married 4 times and hates their current marriage. Do you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't work. Nobody
Yeah.
wants a fitness coach that's, 500 pounds and sitting there eating potato chips while he or she's telling you what to do. You've got to go find somebody. When Matt and I looked for marriage advice, we went and found a couple that was happily married 35 years and said, help us, And so when you're looking for that support, it might not be the person you think it. That's the other thing I've learned. The
Hmm.
people you think should support you or you even want support from might not be your people
The
to
right
support you
ones.
through what you're going through. But it doesn't change the point that we're making, that you need a support system. You cannot and shouldn't do it alone. And if you can find that person or couple people, it will make a world of difference.
I love that. And then in the interim, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
as we're doing this, a big important part of our journeys as people is understanding. You talk about setting boundaries, which I think is a part
Yes.
of this as well, which is
Sure.
that self care,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do we care for ourselves in a way that uh, gives us a cup in which we can sort of retain some of this stuff and be able to pour out for others, or to have the energy to face these circumstances. um, yeah.
Yeah, I used to think self-care and rest was like lazy. And I'm like, listen, watching TV all day does not do me any good. I want to kill myself. Like, I don't like to watch TV. I don't like to sit around. Like, and so I always equated rest with, like, I can't do this. And so I think the first point in self-care is know yourself and understand yourself, and understand, because, self-care and filling your tank and refueling you is what brings you joy. That's different. Like, my husband, again, he could sit and play a video game for 3 hours and feel like amazing after. I would want to cry. Like, and so, but I could clean my house honestly for 3 hours and be totally happy because I like to clean my house, and so,
Hmm.
I think it's knowing what fills you up. It doesn't have to look like something that everybody else does. And so I think understanding what does self-care look like for you is one of the keys in actually doing proper self-care. Because we get these, books or handouts, or people say, this is my self-care regimen. And you're like, okay, I need to do what so-and-so does because she's got, and then you try to do it and it's like, it doesn't work, because
Hmm.
it's not you, and so I think, but you do need to put, when you're on an airplane, they tell you what happens if the oxygen mask falls. You've got to put it on first so you can help the other people. And I find two ends of the spectrum when people aren't doing self-care. Either they're on the end where they feel like, oh, well, that's, I'm just the martyr. I don't have time. I have to take care of everybody else. Or they feel like self-care is self-absorption and, like, it's just all about, and it's neither of those things, but I
Hmm.
have to take care of myself so that I have the capacity to go live my purpose. And
Hmm.
same with the listener. You've got to start taking care of yourself, but it doesn't need to look a certain way. It needs to look like, I have a handout that's in there's a thing in the book, and there's a handout that is a free download. I can get the link for you, but it's refueling stations for your life. And the idea of this
Yeah.
for me came from John Maxwell, but he had nourishing stations, I think. But it's filling out those different things: music, books, people, places, hobbies that fuel you, and knowing what those things are so that when your battery starts to go low, you can go back to those things and refuel it.
Yeah, that's huge. I know I never understood or took the time to understand what my own needs were. Right. And so
Yes,
it was impossible for me to be able to care for myself because I didn't pay attention enough to even
correct.
realize what I needed in the first place. And so you do have to identify like, well, what do I need? Is it a break? Is it time away?
Yes.
Is it more interaction with people?
Hmm.
Is it exercise?
Hmm.
Is it a change in my diet? I mean, it could be anything, but all of those
Yes.
things help to contribute to to give you the ability to then really be able to help people. Otherwise, you'll just get burnt out and
Yes.
not be able to pursue your passion and purpose as you talked
Right.
about. Um, so great. I mean, this has been very insightful, even for me, and kind of talking through this. And so, a couple of things to sort of close us out here. First of all, like, of everything that we've sort of talked about and we've and woven through today, I think you've got some really great advice that you have shared. But if there was like one thing in particular that you feel like you wanted to leave our listeners with today, like what do you think would be that one thing that you feel like would really sort of resonate and help them on their own journey?
I think just based on this conversation, this isn't what I plan to say, is um, the I think you must make investing in yourself a priority. Like you must get to know yourself. I mean, I could talk to you for 10 hours about self-awareness. I might just write a book on it because it's just been huge in my life and taking the time to get to know myself. And that's not going to happen overnight. But the key to doing that is reflecting on every experience. Like reflection turns experience into insight. If you can stop and reflect on that experience and grab the insight from it, and then you put that in your toolbox, you put that as part of your life, you build it into your life. Then the next one, you reflection turns. But you've got to take time to invest in yourself because you are worth it, and you have a purpose out there that nobody else was put on this earth to do. But you have to be able to know yourself, grow yourself, become the person that can actually carry out that purpose. And it's a process of evolution. Look, the 4 weeks after I turned the corner from my mental health, I started sharing my story and helping other people. I was far from out of that battle. I'm still coming out of that battle. And so, but I have been able to help people in the process because I've been getting myself better in the process. And so you need to take the time to invest in yourself and know yourself and find that purpose. I think it really starts there because otherwise you can do all of the things like I'm an action, but when you're not doing them from a place of health in all aspects, it it doesn't go anywhere. And so start with you because that's the only thing in person you can change.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit, and the purpose and point of this context, a lot of ways, is to help people share their stories and talk about what they're doing and how they're helping other people, which
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking about here and kind of how you help other people. But in sharing your story, like you just mentioned, you've been able to really make a greater impact, and you've embraced all parts of your story and have shared those things.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of share a little bit to the entrepreneur that might be listening
Sure.
or the person who thinks that they don't have a story worth sharing? How invaluable it's been to embrace your story and to share it.
Yeah, having not having a story worth sharing. I've heard that 100 times and more. Because I used to lead a sales team years ago. That's another story from what helped me turn the corner, and that business blew up for me because I shared my story. And my team would go, "Well, I don't have your story." I'm like, "No," and then they would try to be like me, and it doesn't work. I'm like, "No, you guys stop. Like, you're not me. You haven't lived this. You're not my story. Like." Find your story. And so I think the two
Mm,
keys of that is you do have a story that's going to resonate because my story doesn't resonate with everybody. My personality doesn't resonate with everybody. And same for you. And so if you will find your story, it doesn't have to be like earth shattering or dramatic, but if you will dig deep, you have a story. And but the other side of that is you have to be willing to share that story. And so
mm,
many people I worked with
yeah.
and even my clients that are like wanting to build, but they're like, well, I have a story, but I'm afraid to share it. And the thing, and because even people will come up to me and say, Christy, like, how do you like talk about some of this stuff? And I'm like, because
Yeah.
it's not about me. My mindset coach years ago told me, Christy, you have to live in the duality of this has everything to do with you because it's all about you and your story, but it has nothing to do with you. And that's the duality that I live in every single day is this I only tell my story to help other people. I could care less
Mm,
about you telling you my story, but I am willing to use it to help you because I'm not insecure about it. I don't care what you think of me. I'm doing it to help the people that it can help. And so I think that, and you have to stay true to your story, because when you start to try to take somebody else's story or it just doesn't work. It just
mm,
doesn't. People can see right through that. But if you will have the courage to get to know your story and then share it, I think, as an entrepreneur, like, that is the difference maker. And that's the thing that nobody can take from you. Like, I don't sit around every day worrying about people stealing my material or being a better speaker than me, because I'm like, I nobody can take my story, nobody can take my personality, nobody can take the person I've become. Like, you can't duplicate those things. And so
mm.
I think that's where it's been powerful for me in building businesses. And I think it's just getting people over that, either an insecurity or a fear of rejection, or there's different things that drive that in people. But
I love that. I say almost verbatim so many things like that too to our clients as well as we're
okay.
working with stories, just of like, you're anybody can come in and copy your goods and services.
Sure.
Like that is duplicable, but
Hmm.
your story and you are not. And it's the
Correct.
very thing that's going to attract your ideal clients because
Yes.
they resonate with you. It's like, the snowflakes and the fingerprints and all the kind of different analogies that you could use to
Yes.
show this. And so I love that you're saying that because it's probably good for people to hear it from somebody other than me who's been through, a world of experience too. So thank you.
And there's a quote from my mentor that I love and I think will resonate with the entrepreneur. It's love me or hate me, but there's no money in the middle. And so when you are true to yourself, either people are going to resonate with that and love that, or there's somebody else for them. But you can't try to be everything to everybody.
Oh, that's great. Well, I love that advice, and I think that's a great place for us to kind of wrap it all together. Love me or hate me, but there's no money in the middle. That's
Yeah.
sums it all up right there. But well, Christy, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I've really enjoyed your insights and the wisdom that you've been able to share today, and just appreciate you taking your time out to do that for us today.
Thanks for having me. I Anytime I can help somebody, I'm all for it. So
Well, thank you. And thank all of you for listening. And as always, hopefully you found some valuable information today. And if you did, please like, subscribe, buy Christie's book. There will be a link in the description for you to be able to do that. There's a lot of great and more wisdom in there than she was even able to share today, with some really powerful and impactful stories. And until next time, keep elevating and accelerating. Thanks.